days and a reading fever, and by the time I finished reading the book, after passing through its 6 storylines set in the past, present, and future, I know some of you know where this is going, and reaching its now famous last line, "Yet what is an ocean but a multitude of drops?" I knew several things. I knew I'd never read a novel like this before. I knew this novel would influence many fiction writers for years to come. And I knew I had just read a masterpiece. But there were plenty of things I didn't know, starting with the book's title. And shortly thereafter, David sent me an email and said, "What do you think of Cloud Atlas?" It was perfect. That long weekend with that manuscript, I could not have known that Cloud Atlas would go on to become a finalist for the Booker Prize. I could not have known that it would sell nearly 1 million copies in the United States alone. I could not have foreseen the $100 million movie, and I definitely could never have imagined seeing Cloud Atlas at my local Kmart with Tom Hanks and Halle Berry on the cover. But I like that. Since then, there were a lot of other things about David's career I could never have imagined, including 2 more beloved and best-selling novels, Black Swan Green and The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet. Nor could I have imagined in 2013 David would co-translate for Random House, along with K.A. Yoshida, the remarkable memoir of a 13-year-old Japanese boy called The Reason I Jump. Way back in 2003, I could never have foreseen the hundreds of thousands of lives The Reason I Jump would touch, or the nearly half year that book would spend on the New York Times bestseller list. And now that gets me to the bone clocks. Let me take you back to Christmas holiday 2013, just 6 months ago. I went off on my winter break with an even more ginormous manuscript called The Bone Clocks. By the time I finished it and reached its soon-to-be famous last line, "For a voyage to begin, another voyage must end, sort of." It was 2014, and I knew a few things. I knew I'd never read anything like it before. I knew its protagonist, Holly Sykes, would go down as one of David's most memorable characters, and I knew the book would cause a sensation. I also knew I had read another masterpiece. But there's a lot about the Bone Clocks I couldn't know last January, and still a lot I don't know today. I couldn't know that Publishers Weekly, just this week, would start its review with this line: "Is The Bone Clocks the most ambitious novel ever written? Or just the most Mitchell-esque?" The future of The Bone Clocks is yet unwritten, but I don't know about you. I can't wait to see how it all ends. Please help me welcome David Mitchell. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask David a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to you to ask questions. David, I'm going to assume that most people in this room have not read The Bone Clocks, so could you briefly tell us what it's about?
No.
I understand.
Yes, but I'll be as brief as I can. My publicist and I have worked out something called an elevator pitch, which is sort of where you give a short version of the book in case you meet someone in an elevator. But before this event, she said, just make sure it's not the Empire State Building elevator pitch. So as quickly as I can. It is about 6 stages in the life of its protagonist, Holly Sykes. We meet her first in about 1984 as a rebellious teenage punkette. Then again in 1991 as a young woman in Switzerland. Then again in 2005 married to a foreign correspondent who's just back from Iraq in the south coast of England, a family wedding. We meet her in the next decade, in this present decade, as a kind of reluctant, bewildered author of a best-selling psychic memoir. We meet her again in the 2020s, just over about 5 days, of course, of 2024, here in New York, in fact, mostly. with a few backflashes, but I won't get into those because it's a short elevator pitch. Then, lastly, we meet her in the 2040s, again over a weekend when she's a grandmother and guardian of 2 young children, in a world rapidly going to hell in a handcart. If this wasn't giving myself enough work to do, Holly's life is sort of erupted into periodically by kind of by an under-novel. And the under-novel is about a murderous feud between 2 circles of pseudo-immortals, one of which is more or less benign, the other which is decidedly predatory. Holly starts off, when you first meet her in 1984, as a kind of unwitting pawn in this murderous chess game. But by the 2020s, we discover she's become its decisive weapon. No whispering, "He's been written Twilight" in the back, because not at all. So that, in a nutshell, and in a fairly long elevator ride, is
Tall building.
What it's about, yeah.
When I was reading it, I asked myself many, many times, and I know readers will as well, where did this come from? What's your answer to that?
To leg it. The answer is novels have a number of seeds, and they don't really just grow from one, but of course you need to pick one. It's essentially, David, it's essentially my midlife crisis novel. It is in fact my midlife crisis. You sort of reach this point, you young people, if you're in your 20s, all that beauty and health and nothing personal. And you're in your 40s, and mortality, it's no longer something way over the horizon after all these sun-kissed years. You actually start to feel it. It's there in your kneecaps. It's in the twinge in your back. Yeah? Yeah. And you look into the mirror. Dad, how did you get there? The lines go on your face and your ears get bigger and nose, you don't really know where. Anyway. And in response to this, some men may run for political office, or buy a Maserati, or indulge in some ill-advised extramarital entanglement, but no, I don't have the money or the stamina for any of that kind of thing. So I sort of wrote this book where a number of characters are propositioned with this Faustian pact. And the Faustian pact is, you never do have to age, you never do have to get sick and old and die, ultimately. You can stay exactly as you are now, 25, and all you have to pay, the only price for this Faustian pact, it's a very, very small thing, all you have to do is agree to have your conscience amputated. And the book is, it works through variations on possible answers to that pact. 1 or 2 people accept it, 1 or 2 other people don't. So it is sort of, it's both the seed of the story and, in a way, its heart pumping away in its otherwise social realist ribcage.
In this review I quoted from Publishers Weekly, they say, is it the most ambitious novel ever written? You obviously cannot comment on that. But the second part of that sentence is, or is it the most Mitchell-esque? And what do you think they meant by that?
I wish the journalist was here, because I'd quite like to know myself. But I suppose in some ways, well, I am best known for Cloud Atlas. It's the only one that's made it to Kmart so far. Certainly
just wait.
Tom Hanks appearing in it. So I guess sort of the stack of adjectives that might be filed underneath Mitchell-esque would be adjectives that have been drawn from people's perception of that book. So painted on a very large canvas, a probably naive and maybe even childlike compunction to hack in as much of the known universe as you possibly can into this weighty 600-page form known as the novel, with, it's a bit self-aggrandizing to use the word Dickensian. I'm not applying it to myself, but just to the method of, like a loom, the character strands running through and characters intersecting in their lives, as I think we do in our own lives. I think this is mimesis drawn from life, as well as the characters walking in from others, from other books I've written, and walking out again after having altered the trajectory of the book. So something like this. I don't know. What do you think, David?
I think there's all of that. I certainly agree with. I think the fact that it has 6 parts is something that a lot of readers and writers studied closely in Cloud Atlas, how you use structure in that book, and that, although it's a different structure, but it is 6 parts. And it's first person. And you're mostly known for first person, except for Jacob, right?
Even he's first person pretending to be third person.
Yeah. And I think that you're willing to move through time.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
That sounds great. I'll store it away. Thank you.
One more question, then I'm going to open it up. This idea of characters coming from the previous books to into the book you're writing, into the Bone Clocks. Who did you know from the past, from the previous books? Who did you know you wanted to include, and give them just one hint of who might be there?
There's a character from a book I wrote called Black Swan Green. His name is Hugo Lamb. He's its protagonist's rather Ripley-esque, suave, very persuasive, charismatic cousin who gently bullies Jason into smoking his first cigarette. I knew I had a good part for him, so as it happened he was free, so I talked to his agent, and he said, fine, I'll show him the script and send him along. So
You're hired.
He has a major role in it.
Yeah.
In a way, he's probably the book's number 2 character, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then, I haven't told you this actually, when I was here for the last book in Brooklyn, there was a reading, and there was a young man called Nick Greek, who said he really liked...
I was there that night.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
He really liked Timothy Cavendish, and would I bring him back, at least for a scene in what I'm working on?
Yeah.
And I said, yes, I would. So I put him in there, and Nick, I don't know if you're here, but your name's in it too. But of course it's not you, so Random House Legal don't have to worry about it.
This is not being recorded. And I think that fans of Cloud Atlas will be happy that Louisa Ray has a very small but exciting cameo.
She sends a text. We meet her through text.
Yes.
2005.
Yes.
That's true. She sends us. Oh, and there's a cat. There's this thing called the Moon Grey Cat, which is sort of the spirit of serendipity, which just pads the way cats do. It's odd with cats. You never see them appear, but you never see them go. They're just suddenly there, and they're suddenly not there. And that's the case for the Moon Grey Cat, who's also in the book, and a few other things. But I guess I've included the major ones now.
So we're going to take some questions. Please stand up when you ask your question. Try to keep it brief so we can get as many and speak as loudly as possible because there's no microphone. Over here.
Sorry.
Hello.
Can you talk about, with books with such a panorama of characters, can you talk about the process of managing all those characters? How do you organize it in your head? Is it like almost like a screenplay approach? How do you develop it?
Sure. Thanks very much for the question. About how I manage a panorama of characters. How do you handle a big cast? Messily would be the shortest answer. A little bit like the NSA, I keep files on them. I know how old they are, I know where they were last seen, what their whereabouts were and are. and so they're there if I ever need to bring them back. Once I've started on a book though, well, this is the beauty of breaking it down actually. I know I produce these big hefty books from time to time, but I still kind of think of myself as a writer of novellas rather than a novelist. A writer of novellas with doors and passageways and corridors and an overall master plan. Novellas which I know when you put this one next to this one, they'll sort of make a third colour just by virtue of their nextness, their propinquity. But yeah, basically I write novellas. And this is because I saw Jodie Picot was here earlier. She writes these beautiful novels. She's a novel writer. I can only handle so many the characters at the same time. I can only handle a smallish world per time. So I sort of build these larger novels up out of novellas, like a kid with Lego. Thanks for your question. That's my answer. Thank you. I'll let you choose.
Right here in the middle.
It seems like you're not too optimistic about the future. Can you speak to why that is?
Why am I not optimistic about the future? Have you seen the news lately? Essentially, it's oil. I mean, I'm worried about climate change and the imminent death of antibiotics and the constant ascendance of people of the nature of Kim Il-jong and you can write your own list to positions of power in the world, but essentially it's oil. We're here because of oil, clothes we wear came from China because of oil, I flew here because of oil, the lighting, the heating, the aircon, the transport systems, it's oil, oil, oil. And we are devoting some resources into imagining and bringing into being the post-oil world, but we're devoting far, far more resources into persuading ourselves that it's all going to be okay. And I don't see how it can be. So yeah, I can't walk around a nervous wreck the whole time thinking the oil's going, what about my kids, what about my grandchildren, jeez, what's going to happen, we can't fly, we can't eat, winter, I can't walk around like that. But when I'm in my writing hut and I want a good ending for a novel that's going to be kind of difficult to forget, then yes, I'm going to press that little app called Dystopia, and there's hope. We're clever, resourceful, bright things as well as destructive and short-sighted and selfish. So there's hope, but I would like to see more of this hope transformed into action, if possible. If we could arrange that for September, that'd be great.
Over here.
I'm wondering what you thought of the movie Cloud Atlas.
I was very happy with the movie, I'm happy to say.
Some of your readers were not.
Yeah. I understand that. I felt, well, it's an unfilmable book. It is unfilmable. But bearing in mind the small caveat that it is an unfilmable book, they did a fantastic job. And disassembled it and reassembled it in the form of a film using methods that only film can deliver to achieve results that only film can deliver. I couldn't have asked for anything more. I mean, they approached and conducted the project. This is the directors, the Wachowskis and Tom Topfer. They approached the directors with total integrity. The changes they had to make, if they hadn't made them, the film simply wouldn't exist. So, film is compromise. It always is and has to be, and 'twas ever thus, always will be. But bearing in mind all of the above, I'm really happy with it, and I still Skype with Lana Wachowski every few months, and we talk for hours about all sorts of things, and that's an outcome that I cherish. As well as just a temporary visa into film world that it gave me, just to look at that as an anthropologist and spend time with not only actors but set designers, language coaches, and entertainment lawyers who are badass, scary people. It was and remains in my mind a very positive experience. Answer your question.
In the red here.
You mentioned you seem to have several characters who appear in multiple books. The details of them are not always consistent from one book to the other. I'm still not sure if Louisa Ray is a fictional person in a fictional book or a real person in a fictional book. Do you see your books as like taking place in some kind of a shared universe with some consistency, or are you just doing what you want to do?
Thanks for your question. I can tell by the laughter you heard the gentleman pretty much there. So, how well calibrated is this alternative universe where my books are set and which is slowly getting built like some Minecraft gone mental? Generally as well calibrated and consistently as I can, with just the minor detail that Louisa Ray isn't actually real according to Cloud Atlas. Damn it. However, I indulged myself in the ultimate vanity just once of going to a symposium where academics were discussing my work, and a compatriot, actually, an American academic from somewhere, was over giving a paper called The Multiverse of David Mitchell. You try to be humble, you try to be self-effacing, but God, thank you, the multiverse. How could that not sort of make the megalomaniac within just go, yeah. It did. That's my get-out clause. It's a multiverse. It has got this San Andreas fault running down the middle, which you just referred to. Is Louisa Ray and everything after, therefore, real or not? Basically, thank God it's a novel and not a work of fiction, and my tenure track depends on it, because I would not be getting that professorship if it were the latter. The novel is baggy, inexact form. It thrives on inexactitude, and that's my line, and I'm sticking with it. Thank you.
In the back there. Yes, you.
Hello.
Can you speak loudly?
When your stories reach even a minor turning point, and you go back, I assume you read your finished product numerous times, do you feel a sense of pride?
Do I feel a sense of pride in my books? You pulled the rug out from under my feet there. I thought you were going to ask me about plot development, but instead you asked me about pride, which is fine. I do my best. It's lifelong learning. It's a lifelong craft. I'll never get, if I ever feel myself getting too big for my boots, then I'll reread Anna Karenina or John McGahern or something by John Cheever that's about 8 pages long, and this sort of come on, I have a long way to go yet. I don't reread them once they're published. I reread them pretty much for the last time when I'm working with the page proofs. Pages you get from printers, and just to find out any little mistakes that have crept in, or ones, this is your last chance to change anything. And then, of course, I read them when I promote the book on tour. And after that, in a way, the only way to stay, I think, sane is to immediately plunge into your next book. And if there's any people in the audience who are sort of who will be publishing soon for the first time, that's my strongest piece of advice. Before the reviews start appearing, make sure you're well into your next book. And it reminds you that despite the fact you do need to be an author and have a public persona and appear in the big wide world with your books to fund the writing, you are primarily a writer. As a writer, I try to be the best craftsman I can, and I try to learn more, and I try to shoplift from the greats, if I can. And that's okay, they shoplifted in their turn. Bunch of shoplifters. Shoplifters of the world unite. And in this fizzling out way, my answer has come to an end. I do my best. That's it. I do my best.
So we have time for one more question. I'm going to ask you to self-edit. If any of you have a long question, put your hand down. Right here in the plaid.
I did have a long preamble, but in the interest of time.
Thank you.
Have you ever considered publishing in a serialized form?
Have I ever considered publishing in a serialized form? In a newspaper, for example, right? Like Dickens. Not really. In a way, the dominant serialized narrative is actually the HBO box set. It's House of Cards, it's Game of Thrones, which is an interesting case, of course, because it's both. But it changes what books are. It's tempting. Obviously, you need to spend more time on recap. This is obviously why big, thumping, great Victorian novels are big, thumping, great Victorian novels. You do need to spend more time reminding the reader about who is who. The early-ish 21st century novel tends to view that as a necessary, undesirable ballast or filler and to be avoided. So even long novels would generally be sleeker than the 19th century serialized counterparts. I think if I were, then I would actually eschew the novel. I would see if my agent could pitch an idea to long-form TV producers. But I've got too many novels I want to write. I know what the next 5 are. I write about one every World Cup. That's 5 World Cups away. Good God, that's 20 years. It takes me to my mid-60s. I can't really spend time on anything else. If you have to serve somebody, I serve the novel, and you have to choose who you're going to serve. You can't really have 2 masters at the same time. So I hereby choose the novel in front of all of you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. How many in September?